Big dog. What up, everybody? Welcome to Coffee Hour. My name is Paul Abernathy. It is Friday. It is payday, as Haas will tell you. Welcome to Coffee Hour. If you've never been here before, we do this Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. It's not always just about code. We talk about anything, any topic that comes up. We live vicariously through all of you that follow us, even those that watch on the replay. And we not always talk about code. It could be any topic that we want to talk about. It just so happens that right now we're in the middle of talking about the various types of wiring methods and digging through the code on the wiring methods. This week we've already talked about PVC. We've talked about EMT. Today we're going to talk about probably the third most popular conduit. It is Beatbox Friday. You might get a piece of that. I don't know. What's up, Michael? Glad to have you here. Manny, I see you. JPB, I see you. Corbin, I see you in here. Peter, Adam, I see all of you in here. Appreciate y'all joining. We'll go through some shout outs quickly. But again, let me know who you are, where you're from in the comments. We love having you here. But we've already talked about two wiring methods this week. Today, we're going to talk about rigid metal. So if you have questions that are germane to RMC, which is the acronym for rigid metal conduit, please, by all means, ask it in the chat. Or, you know what, silence, we always say, forever hold your peace. If you're silent, you just don't have a question to ask if it's germane to the topic. But remember, we do take requests, and you can do all that over on paulabernathy.com. It's a free service that we've had now for quite a few years. It is no cost. You can submit questions, and I answer a lot of them. I answered some this morning that was sent to me through the Let's Ask Paul. Got up early. I have a lot of them, so I have to go through them all. They're not all going to make it on a podcast or all make it on show, but I do my best to try to answer them via email back to the person. So make sure if you've sent me something and you said, Paul, I haven't got a response, make sure you check your junk mail or your spam mail, because I never know. Also, for those that are in our programs or that email us, remember that our system, for some reason, has a hard time with MSN-based email addresses like hotmail.com, live.com, Outlook. You might have a program in your course that uses that email address or whatever it is at Outlook or at MSN or live.com, whatever. We have a hard time with those because their servers has the server that we use for our courses and everything was on a server that previously was a shared server. Now it's dedicated to us, but the problem is it got noted by their system as spam. So it bounces those messages. So it doesn't mean you can't sign up for courses and do everything, but you may not get your notifications if you're using one of those MSN based like Hotmail, Outlook, Live, or MSN. So again, we recommend Gmail or something else. But again, we have problems with those. It's something that we constantly try to fix, but we can't change that. The hosts are just, it's not our host. It's actually Microsoft and all them that have a problem with it. So I can't fix it. So my solution is, if you're logging into our programs, use your username and your password, because it might not work with your email, but it should allow you to check to get in. But when it comes to communication, you might get a response back from our Gmail account rather than our corporate account, because we know that the corporate account is going to get blocked. But so don't be alarmed if you see something from our personal Gmail account, my personal Gmail account, or Jeff's or Darlene's or whatever, because that's the only way we can communicate with you when it comes to email. You get me? So again, we have a little problem with the Microsoft thing. I can't fix it. It's based on the server that we are using for our programs. It was already blacklisted, I guess, with them, and we're working hard to get that fixed. But it could affect it if you're using one of those email addresses. So just keep that in mind. Not overly promoting Gmail, but Gmail doesn't have a problem with it. So and Gmails are free. So Just saying. Doesn't hurt to get another email account if you're just using it for your studies. Anywho, welcome again to the show. We're going to be talking RMC. Now, as always, sorry for yesterday's replay. I had to do that. I was at a doctor's appointment for the diabetes thing. It seems that when you don't take your medicine for 3 months, for some reason your A1C goes up, and mine is now up to almost 13, just with not taking meds for 3 months. And many of you heard the story about why I didn't take the medications, because my wife accidentally threw all of them away right after we got them. She is in the early stages of Alzheimer's, so the memory does come and go. And so she was holding them for me, and she ended up throwing them in the dumpster. Long story. I didn't want to go through the hoopla with the insurance for all that. So I just went 3 months without medication. And of course, my A1C went from 7 all the way up to almost 13. So is what it is. Right now, my blood sugar is sitting at 358, even after fasting all night. So yeah, got problems. But don't we all, really? Don't we all have problems? So anyway, enough of my problems. Hold on, let me make sure I silence my phone. Sorry about that. Okay, now let's go in and do some shout outs real quick, and then we can get into today's lesson, which we'll be talking also a little bit. I'm gonna touch on insulated fittings. Just a quick touch on it, because again, I'm seeing a rash of videos online and a rash of images where people are using an insulated bushing, for example, on SC cable. And if you want to do that, that's fine. I will tell you that the way the fitting is designed, it makes it irrelevant. The same way that you're not required to use anti-short bushings on MC cable because of the design of the fitting and its UL listing. But if you want to continue to do those different things, and remember, an insulated bushing that goes on a connector is different than a red head that goes inside of AC cable between the armor and the conductors. Again, you can use them on MC, but not required. But anyway, different things. Okay, so just want to make that clear. So we'll be talking about that a little bit, clear the air when it comes to that. And I'll be glad when my new tripods come in so that it doesn't shake like that. That's crazy. All right, so shout outs this morning. What's up, Marlon? Glad to have you here. Go through these quickly. Manny, Beatbox Friday. Oh, yeah, there you go. Got you some beatbox there. What's up, Adam? Thank you. Again, talking 344 today. Absolutely. Let's see, skip my little announcements, because I was chatting with everybody. That's something I usually don't do at the beginning, is do my little chats. But I did. I was feeling, what I was typing away. What's up, Peter? Glad to have you here. Thank you, Adam. Let's spread the knowledge today. We're going to learn a little bit about rigid. Again, if you got questions you want to ask, feel free to ask. If I know them, I'll answer them. If I don't, I'm not going to bullshit you. I'm just not going to. I'll tell you I don't know. Okay, that's what you get from me. The realness. What's up, Haas? Again, payday. That's what I'm talking about. What's up, Corbin? Hashtag wins going on. JPB. Hashtag wins. What's up, Michael? Glad to have you here, my friend. Let's see here. Good morning, Edgar. Glad to have you here. Alex, good morning. Happy Friday. Crypto's in the house. What's up, Crip in the house? Good morning. Glad to have you here, my friend. Robert's in the house from San Antonio. Good morning, Robert. Glad to have you here. Of course, I expected Paul to be here. Good morning, my friend. Glad to have you here, as always. Well, we got Michael from upstate New York. Welcome, Michael. Glad to have you here. Poppy's in the house. What's up, Poppy? Glad to have you here. Showing us how to do the win, being patriotic at the same time. What's up, Poppy? Glad to have you here, my friend. Frank the Great is in the house. Glad to have you here. We made it through the grind. We made it to the end of the week, my friend. That's a good thing. It seems like as you get older, I know working in the field's different. The days drag on, but me working from the office, and I get inundated with calls all day, from engineers to whatever as support for Prismium Encore. The reps, it just seems like I'm writing letters for almost every application where the inspectors go, well, I need a letter for this, a letter for that. Even though it's right there in black and white in the code, or it's right there in the standard, they still are going, well, I need a letter. Like, that makes a difference, right? Like a letter from me at the manufacturer is going to make that much of a difference. But it seems like I'm writing them freaking things every day. What's up? What's up, Poppy? Up, there you go. New Jersey.
Woo, 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 woo.
Big dog. Let's see here. We got Angel. I'm doing good, my friend. Thank you for joining me over on the YouTube channel. Appreciate you. Thank you for coming. There's a red dog. Woo, 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 woo. Red dog. Big dog. What's up? Glad to have you here as always, my friend. Very loyal to the show. I appreciate it. I do. What's up, Angel, over on Facebook? Good morning. I am doing great. Every day I wake up is a blessing. So again, I cannot complain. There is absolutely not going to complain. I could sit here and complain about my health, but you know what? I do it to myself. So you can't blame anybody but yourself, right? I'm the one that eats the Twinkies. You know what I'm saying? I'm Twinkie boy. All right. Watch it. I'm just saying I like Twinkies. Don't be stop. Let's see here. Adam got up at 5 a.m. Big pint of coffee going. Glad to have you here, my friend. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Yeah, one of the Alzheimer's is it's a strange thing because it causes all kinds of problems, from memory to all of a sudden just anger from her, or mad at something, mad at me because I have my patience is something that I pray to always have a little bit more of, because again, it's not just the people that go through that, it's the people that have to help care for the people, because you really have to have patience, because if they ask things over and over and over again, you can get frustrated, or it's not her fault. Most of the time it's I get upset. It's my patience. I have very little, my ADHD, so again, I have to work on that. So again, remember, just like Facebook, just like all social media, and friends that you might have gone to school with, or whatever you see on social media, it looks like their life is perfect. Dude, it's not. Okay. I'm an educator. I teach. Most people know the stories. I'm like everybody else. And I have the same issues that come up on a daily basis, like everybody else. Mike Holt's the same way. Ryan Jackson, same. We're all just educators. We all have life, and it is what it is, right? You just take lemons and you make lemonade the best you can. But I do appreciate it. Rob, Melting Toast, good morning. Also shouting out to all the code nerds out there. Get y'all's things going. What's up, Keith? Glad to have you here, my friend. Keith, I believe, sits on the code panel with me. Welcome. Good morning. What's up, Todd? Good morning, Todd. Glad to have you here. Rob, Beatbox Friday. I don't feel beatboxy today. There you go. So that's all I got, man. Come on. It's a Friday, for goodness sake. What's up, Cray Cray? Glad to have you, Cray Cray, here from Nashville, Tennessee, as well. Any of you out there play guitar? I'm trying to learn to play guitar more, and I'm using tabs. And is it just me? But it seems like the way the strings on the tabs is E, G, B, blah, 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 blah. But the tabs seem reverse. So when it shows the tabs, I'm thinking, shouldn't it be the other way? At the bottom, it just, I don't know. I'm having a hard time with it. I'm past the strumming stuff. I'm now trying to learn riffs, and anyway, I have a heck of a time with it. Anyway, thank you all for joining me, those that have joined me. Also, shout out to those that are behind the scenes. I don't answer questions over on TikTok. You got a question, you bring it over to the live stream. Over on YouTube, it's Master the NEC. So I don't really interject with the, apologize to those that are offended by it. I don't interject on TikTok. So it's just no way I can do it. First of all, I can't see the screen. And secondly, it would take me away from the show, and we ain't going to do that, right? Also, real quick, for those that have not visited yet, please check out fasttrackstube.com. That's our exclusive platform for videos. And you'll see videos there that you won't see anywhere else. So check that out. Okay. All right. Let's go to the lesson today. All right. So what first thing I want to talk about is insulated fittings. So this is 300.4, and we'll go look at that in the NEC if we need to. You'll see it's 300.4, and here's what it says. It says, where raceways contain 4 AWG or larger insulated circuit conductors, entering the cabinet, which is box enclosure or raceway entry, doesn't matter, says the conductors must be protected by an identified fitting that provides a smooth, rounded, insulated surface unless the conductors are separated from the fitting or raceway by other securely attached identified insulating material. All right, so this also applies if you have certain types of entry for example, hubs. If you're coming in through a hub, is what you see in this picture, and I'll zoom in on this so it's easier to see. You're coming in through a hub, okay? Not necessary to have any fitting, bushing, okay? That type of thing, okay? So just keep, that type of thing. Like, okay, not required to come in through that, okay? Here you see 6-gauge conductors. Oh, let me zoom out a little bit. 6-gauge doesn't apply unless, of course, the wiring method demands it anyway. And we'll look at that in a second because we are going to look at rigid. And y'all remember what it said over when we looked at PVC that required the bushings regardless of size, unless the fitting was designed to make it not necessary, rounded edges or that type of thing. Okay, so you saw that. So this rule right here, 300.4, a lot of people confuse this one. Let me get back here real quick. A lot of people confuse this because I see them seeing SE cable coming into an enclosure and they put the bushing on it, okay? The insulated bushing, and they think that it's required. It is not required because 300.4G specifically talks about raceways and SE cables itself are not raceways. They're wiring methods, but they are not raceways, okay? So understanding the definition of what a raceway is critical because you have EMT, which is a tubing. We talked about that a couple days ago. That is a raceway, okay? All right? But it is a tubing type. It's not a conduit. It's a tubing. So it's basically extruded and then curled and then welded and to create a tubing. So you have a long strip and it runs through a former and it turns it and it brings it and welds it. So you have this continuous, okay? So again, different than a conduit, okay? Where you have PVC, obviously the C is a conduit. It's formed that way. And then of course you have what we're gonna talk about today, RMC, which is a conduit. All of which are raceways, but MC cable is not a raceway. It's a cable. AC, it's a cable. SE is a cable, not requiring you to put those bushings on there, insulated bushings that we're talking about in 300.4G, okay? Now, could your specific article, like when we were dealing with 352, could that require a bushing? Yes. Okay, but don't confuse that with 300.4G because that is only when we're bringing conductors in through a raceway and the conductors are 4-gauge and larger, and insulated, okay? Has nothing to do with the bare. It has to do with the conductors are insulated coming through there, that's going to require it to have that insulated fitting, okay? Now, that is 300.4G of the NEC. Then it says conduit bushings constructed completely of insulating materials shall not be used to secure a fitting or raceway, 300.4G, okay? All right, so let's see here. Let's go to 300.4 because I'm already kind of have it geared up. So let's go there real quick so we can just put some eyes on it. What's up, Christopher? I see you here. All right, so protection, okay? All right, so that's A, that's B, that's C, that's D, parallel with framing members. Y'all all familiar with that. And E, F, G, fitting. Okay. So where I get a lot of confusion for people is that they think this fitting is required for SE. And they'll say, well, you know what? It's worth it for me to protect it. If you want to do it, that's fine. I see it all the time. I get it. But it's very clear that it says right here, we're raceways. And I'm going to tell you, an MC cable is not a raceway. Go look up the definition of raceways. Go look at the different wiring methods when it talks about being a raceway. MC is a cable assembly. Okay. SE is a cable assembly. Does not require these insulated bushing. Okay. Or this insulated fitting. All right, so containing 4 and larger. Okay, and here's an important part right here. This part right here was added for clarity in the 2023 edition of the NEC. What's up, Jonathan? Glad to have you here, my friend. I've seen videos online lately of these bushings that they may alter these bushings, but that they are actually what's called split bushings, which come and they pull apart. I think Bridgeport makes them. Other manufacturers probably make them. I think of them as goof bushings. Okay, means that you pull the conductors in there and you forgot to put these on. Well, you have to remember, as an inspector now, I'm going to ask questions. What's up, Sven? Glad to have you here. If I come and see this kind of a split bushing on there, I'm going to assume that you pull the conductors in there without putting the bushing or the insulated fitting on first. If I've got 4 gauge and larger conductors in there, I'm expected. So that could have an issue. I mean, you might be able to talk your way out of it. You might say, nah, I just use these. That was on there. It was on there, Mr. Inspector. This is all I had is a split one. So I just figured, why not use them? Well, they cost probably 3 or 4 times more than a regular old plastic bushing, a fitting that would go on there. But that's up to you. I mean, you got to work your way through that conversation. But if you look at the NEC, a significant change that I think is demanding that in these situations where you're dealing with raceways and 4 gauge and larger insulated conductors, prior to pulling them inside of the raceway, okay? And here's what's different about the article. The article that requires fittings is different than this one, because this one that you're looking at, 300.4G, doesn't give a type of wiring method when it comes to the raceways, okay? When it comes to rigid, intermediate, PVC, it just says where raceways contain 4 and larger that you're going to have it. So let's look at that code again, and I'll go here. It makes it a little easier for us to see it. All right, here it says where raceways, non-specific, okay, non-specific so far, contains 4 and larger insulated circuit conductors, and these conductors enter a cabinet box enclosure or a raceway prior to installation of conductors. Very important. So it makes the slip-on ones, the split ones that you put on after the fact, if you're dealing with 4 and larger, actually probably a violation, and you're going to have to. What's up, Pedro? You're going to have to talk with have a conversation with the inspector. Otherwise, these fittings need to be on there prior to pulling the conductors in there, and that makes sense, right? Because I can tell you, as a wire and cable guy, I can tell you what I see when people do an installation and they don't have these insulated fittings on, and they're pulling conductors in there and they don't have the right angle. They don't set up their pull properly. And it literally, the edge of that fitting, what's up, Dwayne? That fitting literally starts scraping off any nylon or digging into the thermoplastic or thermoset material. That causes a problem, because when you start losing that insulating material, you end up calling us and say, if it cuts into it, you go, well, what can I do to fix it? If it cuts it all the way down to the copper or aluminum and removes that insulation, the manufacturer is not going to give you a solution to fix it. You know, you can fix it on your own. You can tape it, whatever you want. But from a manufacturer's perspective, once the insulation is gone, the only companies that can put insulation on a conductor is the manufacturer. So what you do in the field is totally up to you. So don't reach out to the manufacturer and say, do you have a solution? I cut this insulation all off and now it's down to the conductor. We're not going to tell you, at least I'm not going to tell you with Prismium and Encore wire, I'm not going to tell you just wrap tape on it, because I don't think tape is equivalent, okay, to the insulation that you've removed. If you had to use the bushing, you wouldn't have that issue, okay? So that's where I see that majority of the time. So just keep that in mind. What's up, Jason? Glad to have you here. CMECP in the house. I didn't see David this morning. He's busy. Man's busy, but Jason's in the house. All right, so that's what we got there. Now, interesting about that, here you see this all tanned out. It just says that it has to be prior to installing the conductors. You have to have that insulated fitting on there, okay? It says the conductors shall be protected in accordance by any of the following, okay? So it says I got to have, when these are size conductors going in, prior to the installation, I got to have either an identified fitting providing a smooth, rounded insulating surface, probably just a plastic screw-on bushing, probably fine. Do fine. They're listed for the application. Next, it says a listed metal fitting that has a smooth rounded edge. That's those metal bushings that have the plastic insert in them that's kind of rounded as it comes out of the fitting. That's okay too. You might be using that fitting with a bonding lug as well. So you might be doing double duty. Might be using it as a bonding bushing, but it also has the smooth edge inside of it. I see a lot of those. That's fine. Meets this. Not a problem. Next, it says separation from the fitting or raceway using identified insulating material that is securely fastened in place. It may be some type of insert or whatnot that allows for the smooth edge over the fitting. That might be some, if it's identified for that application, that's fine. And of course, threaded hubs or bosses that are integral part of the cabinet box. Obviously, coming in through a hub, if it's a threaded hub, for example, then the conductors are just going to open up into the enclosure or the box. So there's no real bushing necessary for that if you're coming in through a hub. So if you, in our case, if we have rigid and it's coming in the top, say, of a meter, then we're going to be coming in through a screw-in hub. It's going to be wrench tight down into the hub. Well, there's obviously no need to have any insulated fitting as that enters into the box, okay? Let's see here. Conduit bushings constructed wholly of insulated material shall not be used to secure the fitting or raceway. That makes common sense. That means that you can't take the insulated fitting and use that as a mechanical means to hold the fitting in place. Let's say it's an EMT coming in or something else coming in. You can't use, and you have a connector. You're not going to use the insulated fitting for that securement. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. That's all it's saying for that now. Now, also it says the insulating fitting or insulating material could be a sleeve. It could be like a bell sleeve that's fitted into it, that type of thing. It says that shall have a temperature rating not less than the insulated rating of the installed conductor. So again, one of the things to be aware of, if it's a 90-degree rated insulated conductor, then we have to make sure that that insulating fitting or that insert sleeve or that bell that has equally rating of the conductor's insulation, which means 90. And I think most of the manufacturers probably know this by now, right? So most of the products I would say that they make are going to fall in line. So this is not going to be something that you have to burn brain cells over. I think that it's probably, unless you're buying something from China, and who knows what's on that, then it probably is not going to be an issue for you to worry about. What's up, David? Good morning. You heard your name mentioned, busy reviewing a charter school. Okay, just wanted to shout out. I didn't know if I saw you in there, so wanted to shout out. All right, so anyway, so if you look down here if you look at link will give you a bunch of information, and basically it's talking about what we just said. All right, now here you see whether provided separately or as part of the fitting, listed insulated bushings are colored brown, black or brown to indicate their temperature rating of 150 degrees C, and any other color to indicate ratings of 90 degrees C unless specifically marked with a higher temperature. So if you see black or brown, then you know it's 150. Well, if the conductor's insulation is rated 90, you're good to go. Okay, so get used to that, right? Any other color typically is going to be 90 because typically that's what we're going to get with our wire anyway. Most of our wire, we're going to be limited to using it for 75 or 60. Probably because of 110.14c in our application, unless all the lugs and everything's rated 90. But since it is rated 90-degree insulation because of this statement, probably all of them you're going to see, other than the black or brown, are going to be rated 90, but that black or brown could be 150 degrees C. Make sure you check with the manufacturer if you're not sure. Last thing you want is to get all this stuff in and get it all done and have somebody come and say, oh, hey, we got a problem. You got to take all these conductors loose or take these splices loose or take terminations loose because you need to have a bushing on there. And you also run into the argument of whether or not, again, putting this bushing on there, you had it in there prior to putting in the conductors. That's what you're supposed to do, okay? Incidentally, in this picture, you see this right here happens to be one that's also a bonding bushing, but it has you can't really tell, but it has a insert that's rounded in it, plastic insert around the edge, and that's what's meeting the edge requirement on that, so it's no sharp edges on this. This just happens to be one way of doing it, okay? There you go. All right, so anyway, that's always, remember, good information. If you have link, it's like the handbook. I highly recommend Link. I'm not promoting it because I get something from NFPA. Everybody knows my relationship with NFPA and other associations. I sometimes rub people the wrong way. That's okay. I'm not here to please everybody. But in that scenario, Link is amazing because it gives you up to 4 editions of the NEC. Of course, you can access all of them free by going on NFPA's website. I don't know if you knew that or not. You can look at all of the past, not all, some of them aren't available, but mostly, I would say 80% of all of the older editions are available for you to look at for free online. But to have the last 4 editions in your pocket on an app, if you're an inspector or something like that, or you're a contractor in the field and you want to have access to it, because you never know. Maybe you're doing a job where the permit was pulled earlier under a different cycle and now you're working under another cycle. You get in an argument with an inspector. You go back and show that this permit was approved under, let's say, the 2020. And he's thinking 2023, the permit's 2020, and then you can go in and show him what the code was under 2020 if it's different than what it would be under 2023. And maybe you settle that discussion right there on the job site and you can keep going forward. So I'm a big proponent of Link. I have it, and you can use it on desktop, phone, anywhere. Okay, again, not a commercial for Link, but it is, I think it's an invaluable resource. Okay, all right. Let's get back to the lesson. All right, so let's see here. So here as an example, you see some 4 gauge coming in through here. And remember, it's raceway. It's not specific to anything. Okay. All right. Now, talking about rigid, let me go on and get where we're talking rigid. Couple things I'll talk about. Remember, y'all all know that when it comes to the raceway fill, we've talked about this before. When it comes to raceway fill, we have to learn to do a raceway fill calculation. You know, people say, well, I don't want to learn it. I don't need to learn it. I've had people send me comments and say that, Paul, why do you teach raceway fill? It's never on an exam. But I've had people send me questions that they had raceway fill questions on an exam. Other people say, well, why don't you just go to Informative Annex C? One, the Informative Annex are not enforceable, but it's based on solid foundation calculations. So could I go to Informative Annex C and see how many conductors I could put, let's say, in a rigid metal conduit or an EMT or a PVC Schedule 40 or Schedule 80? Yes, I could do that. But that's only going to tell me the number of conductors that I can put in that raceway and not exceed the 40% fill based on, one, all the conductors are the same size. Not practical in the real world, because I know that I'm probably going to have an equipment ground that's smaller or a neutral that's smaller than my ungrounded hot conductors. So it means you got to know how to do a calculation. However, the reason that we can use Informative Annex C effectively is, without doing that, is if I have a situation where, let's say I have a raceway and it says that I can have 4 1/0s in there. I'm just throwing it out there, 4 1/0s. But when I look at my installation, I only got 3 1/0s, and then I have one that may be a 1 gauge. And you're thinking, am I going to do raceway fill calc? The answer to that is no, because I could go to Informative Annex C, and if it says that I could have 4 1/0s in there, but I only have 3 and then a 1 in there, then I know that I'm okay. So there, you can use the Informative Annex that way, just as a quick check to make sure you're okay, that type of thing. So that's perfectly acceptable. Just remember that the Annex is only for raceway fill. It is not having anything to do with conductor ampacity. Adjustment and corrections still apply. This is only to tell you how many conductors of the same size I can have in a given raceway. That's all. That's all it's saying. That's it. Okay, so people read that otherwise, but again, that's how you would use Informative. Nothing's going to take the place of you knowing how to use Chapter 9, Table 4, which is going to give you the diameters of the trade sizes that you're going to need for raceway fill. And then, of course, Table 5 is going to give you the values for the conductors that you're going to put in the raceway. If any of that's confusing to you, go and watch my videos over on Fast Tracks Tube. We have a raceway fill calculation video that'll walk you through all of that type of thing. And we also have some old recorded sessions from when we did the Wednesday nights. That's over there as well over on Fast Tracks Tube if you're interested in that type of thing. Okay. Bending radius, you heard me talk about this yesterday or the other day when I was talking about PVC and when I was talking about EMT and it talks about when you do a field bend. And when you do a field bend, it referred to Chapter 9, Table 2, right? So this is what Chapter 9, Table 2 looks like. I'll zoom it in just so you can see it. This is what the table looks like. And you notice that one column is one shot and full shoe bender. It'll mention that where it expects you to use that column. And then, of course, if it's other bends other than that, then you would use this column. This is here is the maintained minimum radius. So you don't want to be tighter than this. For example, if it's a trade size 1 conduit, then it would be, if it demands you to use the one shot and full shoe bender, then it can't be more than 5 3/4 inches. And you're thinking, what is the measurement for that? It's right here. Okay, from the start of the bend. Oops, hold on. See if I can get, there you go. From the start of the bend, so this is the horizontal, this is the vertical. From the start of the bend to here, this is your radius. Okay, so the radius from here to here cannot be more than, in this case, if it's trade size 1, be 5 3/4. Okay, so this radius. Okay, now if you're saying, well, how do I figure that out? Well, obviously the radius, you have a circle, then you have the diameter is the whole span of the circle. Okay, the circumference is the round, and the radius is from the center to the edge. Okay, so if I had this radius and this was 5 3/4, then I would simply do this times 2, and that would be acting like I'm wrapping it around a sphere. That would be the diameter. And by doing that, it's going to give you the radius. Okay. So, I mean, just different ways to do it. If you buy pre-done bins, but this is really only germane if you're going to, what is that? Rob says, I did a webinar in March on how to do conduit fill. Oh, cool. See, I don't even remember. I think I'm also coming down with memory loss as well. It might come with just age, I guess. But yeah, I probably have a webinar on that over on Fast Track's Tube that you can check out. Thanks, Rob. I didn't think about that. So anyway, these are fundamental things that even though you may think you know how to do them, it's always good to constantly be feeding the brain and watching these videos because you never know what you get out of them. Okay. So if you see right here now, it says bends must be made so that the conduit or tubing remain undamaged with its internal diameter basically undiminished. Okay, you don't want it to squeeze it out. That changes the internal diameter, violation of the code. Okay, bending it in the field using blow torches. No, we want to get away from doing that. Okay, with PVC, it says for any field bend, it says the radius of the curve on the center line of the conduit must not be less than indicated in Table 2 of Chapter 9. If you're buying things that are benders, they're designed not to damage it. If you're using heat boxes and you're bending them in the field, these are things that you just have to be careful about. Okay, if you're just bending a normal 90, that's fine. But if you're bending some kind of awkward bend, then you could run into a problem if you're using a heat box, let's say on PVC or something like that. Okay, just be aware of that. Raceways permitted. Okay, so this is important. This is something to lock in your memory if you're going to be making field bends. It says raceways permitted to use the one shot and full shoe bender column. This column is IMC, RMC, and EMT. Okay. This other column is for what? Bending radius of certain other raceways must not be less than shown in this column. Okay. And that is FMC, LFMC, PVC, LFNC, and ENT. So all of those follow this column. And then the EMT, RMC, and IMC follow this column. And of course, you'll also get that as you read it when it sends you to Chapter 9, Table 2. It'll tell you to treat it as the other bends or to treat it as a one shoe or a full shoe bender, that type of thing. Makes sense? And typically, these full shots and full shoe benders are going to be the benders that you do with your hand. You're going to bend it yourself, or you have a hydraulic that has a boot or a shoe that the raceway fits into, and it kind of goes around it. Pretty much when you use those, it's going to take care of itself. No brain surgery there. The other ones like PVC, LFMC, and all that kind of stuff, ENT, those are things that are flexible that you're going to be bending in the field. So again, you have some maintained minimum bending that is required. So get used to Chapter 9, Table 2 and how you utilize it. All right, rigid metal conduit. RMC is a threadable raceway of circular cross-sectional design for the physical protection And routing of conductors and cables. Yes, you can have cables in a conduit. People still have to remember about raceway fill. If it's from box to box and it's a complete run, then you still got the requirements in Chapter 9, Table 1, Note 9, for example, for filling that raceway. And a cable is treated as one conductor. If you have two cables in there, you got two conductors. If you have three cables in there, you have more than two. Still have your percentage fills, even if you want to put cables in a raceway, but nothing prohibits you unless the specific article for that type of wire method says not to put a cable inside of a raceway. Non-metallic sheet cable, perfectly fine in a raceway. Not an issue. Still have to, if it's there for physical protection and that's it, then you don't have to worry about raceway fill. That's Chapter 9, Table 1, Note 2. But if it's going to be completed each end, so like from a box to a box or from a cabinet to a box, that's a complete run. Now you have to do raceway fill. And you're going to be, if it's one cable in there, then you're going to be 53%. But you got to know how to do that calculation. And we covered that in the video as well when it talks about how to do flat NM cable, because it seems like all of us manufacturers now are making 14 threes, 12 threes in the flat version, and we're getting away from the round version. And again, I don't know what started that trend, but that seems to be what's going on. So you still have your 14 twos, your 12 twos that are the considered elliptical that can go in raceways. But you can put tray cable in raceways. It specifically permits that application. So again, important to know how to do raceway fill anyway. All right. Anyway, so and you can use it as an equipment grounded conductor. Obviously, 250.118 says that RMC, made up French type, and associated couplings and fittings. All of them have to be listed in .6 of those specific articles. If that's the case, then it can make up an effective ground fault current path. Now, do most engineers specify a wire type equipment ground in there? Yeah, most do. And as a wire and cable guy, I appreciate it. But at the end of the day, could you use the RMC? Yes. Again, you have to worry about the integrity, but it's a little more than set screws, for example, with the EMT, which somebody could not tighten down the set screws. In a fault condition, it's probably going to weld anyway. But in reality, that's an improper installation. Whereas when it comes to rigid, you have everything threaded in wrench tight, so you're tightening everything up. So it does create a low impedance effective ground fault current path. So you can do that. 250.118 list rigid metal conduit is an effective ground fault current path. Okay. Obviously, I tell people all the time that when you're constructing that, if somebody interposes, and that means put something in the span that's non-metallic or something that does not qualify, then you got to be careful. One of the things I tell people all the time, and I get this in a design scenario, is that they're doing things like with parking garages or parking decks or something that has an expansion joint, and they change over to FMC or something for that expansion joint. And they forget if they were using the rigid metal conduit as an effective ground fault current path, and now they come to a flexible connection or something that's designed to move, and it doesn't have any bond across it, because you can buy these expansion joints that do have a bonding strip across them to make it act as just one. If you don't have that, for example, and you're doing that, then you have to make sure you meet the integrity. So you'll need a jumper from rigid to rigid over whatever you're using as that flexible means for the expansion joint, let's say in a building or in a parking garage or something like that. So just keep that in mind that if you're going to use the rigid metal conduit, you have to maintain the integrity of the rigid metal conduit. Okay, that type of thing. Just keep that in mind. All right. Let's see here. So RMC is the heaviest, thickest walled classification of metal conduit. So if you're using rigid, you're using the thickest. You're not using intermediate, which is less than the thickest. Still a very good wiring method. It's just not as thick, obviously not as heavy as rigid metal conduit. By the way, rigid metal conduit does come in different types, whether it's aluminum or steel. So it is available in different types. Steel would be called rigid metal conduit. The minimum of the trade size, is half trade size, which again still equates to 1 inch, but we all know, we're learning that it's half trade size. And then the maximum approved size is 6 inch or 6 trade size. All that found in 344.20 is going to tell you the minimum maximum. Now, probably shouldn't be an issue that you have to worry about, because if you're going to buy it from a supply house, They're not going to make it except in half and six. So why do I need to know the sizes? Well, I guess because you could have some rogue stuff coming in somewhere. And, it could be larger than six. I can't imagine that, but could be, and that type of thing. And again, we have to know as far as the sizes per the NEC. I think the manufacturers do a great job of taking care of that anyway, so we don't have to worry. RMC shall be permitted as an equipment grounding conductor, as you see in 344.60. So people want to know, other than 250.118, where it specifically mentions rigid metal conduit, also within the specific article 344 at the dot 60, which is pretty common with most of these metal wiring methods, it'll be dot 60 when it comes to if it qualifies as an equipment ground. Here in 344.60, it explicitly says that it can be used as an equipment ground. So that jives with what we talk about in 251.18 as well. So it's all good. And it's perfectly fine. Again, as long as you make everything up right, you should have no issues, that type of thing. Intermediate, it's essentially the same way. But what we're going to do is we're going to go on and shift to the code real quick and talk. And if you have any questions, please feel free to state them. But real quick, we're going to cover all of the rules real quick for rigid quickly, unless somebody has any specific question otherwise. So here it is at Article 344. The scope is that 344 covers the use, the installation, and the construction specifications. So that tells us it's a three-part layout. So we have our general information, which is our use application. Then we have installation requirements that fall under Part 2. And then we have some construction requirements, specifications in Part 3. Remember that Part 3 is going to pretty much be taken care of by the manufacturer. Okay, they're going to make sure that obviously the standard for this is going to jive with what's in Part 3. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what a manufacturer makes. If it's not going to be NEC compliant, then you can't use it, right? So if your state adopts the NEC, it's a minimum safety standard. It really doesn't matter, how the manufacturer constructs it. If it can't be used because the NEC prohibits it, then it's kind of pointless, right? And no manufacturer wants to spend that extra money to make something that ain't nobody going to use, right? Makes sense. Okay, so here's your first one, 344.6 listing. Again, the dot 6, you'll see that that's coming about here in most all of your articles where listing is requirement. Again, boxes, 314, not necessarily every box has to be listed. Ones that are be using for specific applications, say wet location applications, hazardous location applications, floor boxes, all that stuff. There is a specific listing for that, but a general box might not require any listing at all. Okay, as long as it meets the construction requirements of the box. Same thing with a wireway, for example. Wireways, I could go down to a sheet metal shop and have them make me a wireway as long as it met the construction requirements, or I can just buy them off the shelf. Okay, they're not required to be listed. So again, there's certain things that when the listing's required, you have to meet it. Some things are not required to be listed, but they may be identified for a specific application, and that's okay too, because it is identified, even though it may not be listed, it's identified for use in a specific application. When it comes to wiring and cables and wiring methods, they all have to be listed. Means, for example, we have to do some evaluation, like MC cable is UL 1569, non-metallic sheet cable is UL 719. We have to meet these rules. The wire, THHN, THWN is UL 83. The thermoplastic XHH, thermal set XHHW-2. Lose my TikTokers. The XHHW-2, RHH, RHW-2, USC-2, PVC, PV wire, all of that has to meet UL 44. So there's other standards. It's all listing, okay? But all the wiring methods have to be listed, okay? Tray cable also be listed, those types of things. Anyway, so here's your listing. It says RMC, factory elbows and couplings and associated fittings that you would use shall be listed. That also would include associated fitting, would also be a transition fitting. So if I'm going from one wire method to another wire method, that transition fitting has to be evaluated. If it's going to be used with RMC, it's got to be usable with RMC, but it also needs to be usable and listed for the use of whatever it transitions to. This is where people typically will use a rigid, screw on a coupling, and then screw on another fitting to change over to something. The coupling is not a transition fitting. It may work. It may seem like they fit together. And there's a lot of things in the code that seems like it works and you can get by. But reality is it doesn't make it compliant. So you don't use a coupling to transition between rigid to another wiring method. Use a transition fitting, something that is actually evaluated for both materials or both wiring methods that it will be used with, that type of thing. Okay. So that's an example of when you would run into something like that. Uses permitted. Okay. And remember, dot 10 and dot 12 for most of the wiring methods are going to be dot 10 uses permitted, and then dot 12 explicit not permitted. Okay. So rigid, atmospheric conditions and occupancies, galvanized steel, stainless steel, and the red brass RMC. You heard me talk about that earlier. It can be in steel, it can be in aluminum, it could be stainless steel, right? It could be in red brass, used a lot around swimming pool applications in 680, all those type of things. But here, what it says galvanized steel, stainless steel, and red brass shall be permitted under all atmospheric conditions and occupancies. Okay, so I can use this if it's corrosive. I can use this in the earth. Again, all atmospheric conditions and occupancies. We're okay to use it. So a very broad use for galvanized steel, stainless steel, and red brass. Probably don't see red brass in anything other than pool applications. Unless you're doing, I have seen some red brass installed in a chemical treatment plants, that type of thing. Other than that, stainless steel is very widely used in those high atmospheric condition locations where you may have corrosive conditions, that type of thing. And of course, you have galvanized steel, which is the mainstay. The galvanization is the sacrificial lamb here when it comes to the actual wiring method. So anyway, you've got those options. Next, it says I can use aluminum RMC or I can't. Let's see, what does it say? It says aluminum RMC shall be permitted to be installed where approved for the environment. Okay, so again, approved isn't a very strong word because that is something that when an inspector sees aluminum RMC, especially if it's being placed in the earth or somewhere, and we saw that there's other requirements for that when it comes to like aluminum EMT, having a special additional protection on it or explicit rules of what you can and can't do. Here it's saying, you know what, I'll let you use aluminum RMC where you're in these atmospheric conditions, could be even in the earth, it could be somewhere, but it's got to be approved for the environment, okay? And we're going to see later if there is something else that's required. But starting out, it's saying, look, I'll let you use aluminum RMC in some, but you know what? It's got to improve for where you're using it. And what does the approved mean? Approved means that the jurisdiction's probably going, this is an example where I do write letters. So this is an example where when it says approved, that means the AHJ has to be okay with it. That's what approved means. Doesn't mean listed, although all of these products have to be listed. It's because of the environment that it's going to be exposed to. This is a condition where the AHJ, which may have extended knowledge on the environment, it may be something that is historically what they've done in the area in the past. And they're like, look, I need to prove this. I may need a little something extra that says it's okay for the environment that it's being exposed to. And once they're okay with it, they approve it. But it may require you to bring some additional paperwork, especially from these manufacturers that make the aluminum RMC. And if they say it's perfectly fine in that environment, then that's it. Okay. Then the AHJ will approve it. Next one is ferrous raceways and fittings. Okay. So this would be, it says ferrous raceways and fittings protected from corrosion solely by enamel shall be permitted only indoors and in occupancies not subject to severe corrosive conditions. So I can use the ferrous raceways and fittings, okay, right? And which again may be galvanized steel, right? But it's still if it's a ferrous raceway, it has iron in it, okay, and the fittings protected from a corrosion solely by enamel, then that is okay indoors. But it's also in occupancies that are not subject to severe corrosive influences, not just corrosive influences, severe, okay? And this is a case where the only protection would be with an enamel, not having a galvanization done to it, okay? Just a ferrous raceway that is ungalvanized, for example, that may only have some type of coating on it and you're going to use that instead, that's okay indoors, okay? Because the coating is there for a reason. The manufacturer may design it a certain way, okay? But you got to meet these caveats if that's what you're buying, okay? I think, to be honest with you, most of these Ferris raceways they probably get will be galvanized steel. So it really makes this one moot, but it needs to be there in case you do get a Ferris raceway or fitting that is not, okay? The only protection on it is an enamel. It doesn't have any galvanization or any other type of zinc coating protection or whatever. That's why that rule is there, okay? Now, corrosive environments. Now, you notice that it's set up here. We have uses permitted. There's an A, and then we have the B, corrosive environments. Now, let's read what it says here for this. It says corrosive environments. So assuming we've identified a corrosive environment, it says galvanized steel, stainless steel, red brass, the elbows, couplings, and fittings. It's the whole gamut, the whole ball of wax there. It says galvanized steel, stainless steel, and red brass, elbows, couplings, and fittings shall be permitted to be installed in concrete, okay, indirect burial with the earth, okay, indirect burial applications, okay, or in areas subject to severe corrosive influences where protected by corrosion protection approved for the condition, okay? Most of the manufacturers, what's up, Tara? Glad to have you here. David A., I see you in the house. So most of the time, you're going to reach out to your manufacturer. I'll give you a great website where it has a lot of this information, and that would be going over to a Steel Tube Institute. So Google Steel Tube Institute, and you're going to see a lot of information about tubing, conduits, raceway, metal, all that good stuff over there. In fact, Ryan Jackson is a consultant for them, as Joe Andre. Used to be a gentleman named Dick Lloyd or Richard Lloyd, great guy, passed away a couple years ago, wonderful guy. He was their representative. Talk about a wealth of knowledge. So Ryan Jackson is a wealth of knowledge as he represents the Steel Tube Institute on the code panels, as well as Joe Andre. Joe Andre was a former NEMA rep like me. We worked together. Great guy as well. And they are very much about raceways and tubings and metal and all that kind of stuff. So great resource. But again, make sure you check out Steel Tube Institute. Just Google it. You'll find it. They have a FAQ section. You will be surprised what you learn. In this scenario right here, most of this, like galvanized steel, they will tell you that the protection is already applied to it. That is the galvanization, that is the zinc. Okay, so they'll automatically say that. Okay. Now, if it is a severe corrosive environment, then they may say it needs an extra. Andre is still there, David, because he was at the last code panel I was at, and he was representing Steel Tube at code panel 5. He was still there. So as far as I know, Joe's still around. He hasn't fully retired yet. But Ryan was on Steel Tube on some committees, and Joe was on Steel Tube on the other committees, and he was there with me, sitting right next to me, actually, at Code Panel 5 meeting that we just had, past one. So if he's retired since then, but they both were representing Steel Tube at that time. Now, I imagine that as Joe retires, Ryan will take over the full task, but great dudes either way, both of them extremely knowledgeable dudes, okay? And really, really good guys too. What's up, Swartzy?
Woo, 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 woo. Big dog.
So remember, folks, in this one is this, okay? So these environments, you don't have to seek permission to use galvanized steel, stainless steel, or red brass. Put it right in the earth, right in concrete. All of those are direct burial in the earth are fine. But it says or they can be used in areas subject to severe corrosive influences where protected by corrosion protection approved for the condition. That is the only step that you need to double check with the manufacturer and make sure that the condition that you're going to be putting it in, if it's a severe corrosive condition, make sure, and it's just one simple call, that you make sure that the galvanized steel, for example, which can be directly put in the earth, can be put in concrete, that is a severe condition. Is it that's a corrosive condition. If it's a severe corrosive condition, is that galvanized enough? Or do you require additional coating or wrapping or something like that at a transition as it comes out of the earth? That's why you have to rely on the manufacturers. That's why Steel Tubing Institutes are great. Okay? Right now, When it comes to the aluminum, it says aluminum RMC shall be provided. Okay, not an option here. Okay, it doesn't matter. It says it shall be provided with an approved supplementary corrosion protection where it's encased in concrete. So it's not saying you can't use it in concrete. You're just going to have to wrap it. Okay, or in direct contact with the earth, or in direct burial applications where identified for the application. So if it is an aluminum RMC, it's designed and it's listed for use in direct burial, that is fine. But what this rule says that I don't care what you say, I still need to wrap it in something. And the manufacturer can give you guidance on the different types of wraps that you could put, the overlapping requirements and all that kind of wrap that you need. Reach out to the manufacturers for that. Okay, we do have some informational note here. Let's see here. There you go. There's an ANSI standard, right? Right. Here you go. Other documents such as Steel Tubing Institutes, 21 in there, the guidelines for installing steel tubing. And you have ANSI 101, okay, which is the standard for installing steel conduits, rigid in IMC and EMT. These are great documents that if you're going to be working with that material, get these documents. That way you have them. Usually you can get them in a PDF. You can Google it, screen capture this and write it down and go search for it, that type of thing. What's up, Tony? Glad to have you here. Okay. Now it says should be consulted for approved guidance in corrosive resistant materials or for requirements prior to installation of a non-ferrous metal like an aluminum conduit in concrete, since chloride additives in the concrete mix can cause corrosion. So again, don't be afraid, folks, to reach out to the manufacturer. They will give you all the help you need, and it's usually a lot on their website or just one call away. Like if you're working with wiring cable and you're working with Prismium, or Encore wire, all you got to do is call us. They'll send you right to me, and I'll answer your technical questions. Okay, or Kevin that works for me will answer your technical questions. And now that we're part of Prismium, we have an entire staff that can handle medium voltage questions, low voltage questions. Again, that's 2,000 volts or less. It's low voltage. High voltage, tray cable, whatever you need, please stop thinking that you got to know it all in the field. If you see something that talks about it and you want to protect your butt in an installation where you're not sure, or if it's not explicit, like galvanized steel rigid can go in the earth. I don't need to ask anybody for that. Perfect. However, if it's a severe corrosive environment and I need something extra, then I want to reach out and get the blessing from the manufacturer because they're the ones that know. I think people have too much pride today that they don't want to, or in there's such a hurry that they don't want to take the time to ask that type of thing. And if you're a manufacturer out there, I employ you, your top priority in your customer service, your top priority in your codes and standards is to get these technicians, these skilled tradesmen, answers as quick as possible and accurate as possible. That's all I'm saying. It's our mission to do that as a manufacturer, not just to take your money, right? Or you can try Trade Hog and see what trade. Great, Adam. Appreciate it. All right. So next is cinder fill. Okay. So if I have cinder fill, so it says galvanized steel, stainless steel, and red brass shall be permitted to be installed in or under cinder fill. We're subject to permanent moisture where protected on all sides by a layer of non-cinder concrete, not less than 2 inches thick. Where the concrete is not less than 18 inches under the fill. Let's see. Where the conduit is not less than 18, so it's at least 18 inches down under the fill, or we're protected by corrosion protected approved for the condition, like some kind of wrap or something. So if you have a cinder fill application, engineer specifies out cinder fill, for example, and you want to run galvanized steel, stainless steel, or red brass in it, that's fine. It's just you have to make sure that it's encapsulated, okay, on all sides, okay, for that type of thing if you want to do that. Seems like it's more trouble than it's worth, but if you're dealing with cinder fill, there's also an informational note down here that says, although cinder fill is not commonly used in modern construction, that's why people go, what is cinder fill? Typically not. The cinder fill is not pretty much used anymore, but it is still encountered in older building sites. So cinder used to fill may contain sulfur acid or sulfur, and where combined with moisture I'm already ahead of myself, forms a sulfuric acid, which can corrode metal raceway. Normal applications, normal block, things like that are not going to be considered cinder fill. Okay. So again, use trade hog, look up cinder fill, some examples of cinder fill. Probably not what you're going to see in modern work today anyway. Usually it's going to be block or concrete that is not going to be cinder fill type concrete. So you're not going to have the same issue. So yes, it can come in contact with it. It's not an issue. You'll know if it's a cinder fill because typically residential, never going to deal with this. What you'll deal with it is a commercial site and that'll already be mandated on the drawings or make some statement about cinder fill and then the raceways going in it. If you want to do that with rigid stainless steel or the brass RMC, that's fine. It just has to be protected on all sides with a normal concrete that would be non-cinder concrete. That'd be fine. Okay. Again, don't think it's an issue you're going to run into, but it's in the code, so be aware. Wet locations. All supports, important, just like the other ones. It says all supports, bolts, straps, screws, and so forth shall be corrosive resistant material or protected against corrosion by a corrosion resistant material, something that's applied to it, put on it, or whatnot. Again, we're not requiring these fasteners, which most of these are. There's no listing for that. However, I get there because I consider them fittings and associated fittings. So while there's no official listing for it yet, may come in the 2026. I don't know yet. I haven't looked. Either way, you want to make sure that you're using the proper fastener for the type of wiring method you're using. And it's got to be rated for the environment to which it's being used. Okay. Obviously, if I'm using it outside, then it has to be, if I'm using galvanized steel, then I would want my fittings to be rated for the condition of use. And I'd also want them to be the kind that work with the type of wiring method that I'm using. Okay. It should be common sense, but sometimes common sense goes right out the window. Okay. Severe physical damage. RMCs shall be permitted to be installed where subject to severe, not just physical damage that we get with an EMT, not just what we get with this, we get severe physical damage that you can use rigid metal conduit for that. Dissimilar metals, 344.14, where practicable. I mean, you have to make the effort to route these raceways so where it doesn't create a dissimilar metal contact application. So again, where practicable, it says dissimilar metals in contact anywhere in the system shall be avoided to eliminate the possibility of galvanic action. Stainless steel and aluminum fittings and enclosures shall be permitted to be used with galvanized steel RMC. So I can use aluminum fittings, I can use stainless steel fittings and associated enclosures. I can use them with galvanized steel RMC, okay? And galvanized steel fittings and enclosures shall be permitted to be used with aluminum RMC, okay? As long as it's not subject to what? Severe corrosive environments, which we already know that aluminum has a problem with, unless it has some additional protection. So it's important with this one because it's not just where you run the raceways, it's the connection of these raceways to fittings, to boxes, what you can and what you can't do. Students, a lot of times on an exam, I will actually have them highlight these pieces because it's one big run-on thing in different segments, so it's easier for them to identify what they're doing. And they only throw up a red flag if you're using aluminum, for example, anywhere in the equation. If everything's galvanized steel, then I don't worry. If it is, we'll talk stainless steel in a second. But what I'm saying is, anytime I'm thinking of galvanized steel rigid metal conduit, am I using it with an aluminum box? And I have to go, okay, what does the code say? Well, the code says that I can use galvanized steel RMC with aluminum fittings and enclosures. That's okay. Because so it's once I know what the raceway is, what can I use with it? Then I stop and I go, okay. Let's see, what else does it say? Can I use let's see, aluminum RMC? If I have aluminum, if you're using aluminum RMC, which again, it's starting to be used more, but it's not that frequent. Can I use that with galvanized steel fittings and enclosures? Yes, as long as it's not what? A severe corrosive environment. Well, those are pretty rare, unless you're doing it in a chemical treatment plant and a pool room. Pretty rare, okay? So to get that threshold up to severe corrosive, we don't have a definition in the code. I wish we did so we could use it up in 680. I would like to have something that tells me what is severe, what is the chemical makeup of it, how many air exchanges can I have to reduce the severe corrosive condition. We have none of that right now. So again, you're just going to have to play that by ear. But obviously, if you're in an area where they keep acids, store chemicals, things like that, they could put it in the atmosphere. If they have to do something in the environment to remove such gases or whatever, then chances are you're in a severe corrosive environment. Okay, I'm just saying. Okay, use some common sense. Now, when it comes to stainless steel, stainless steel rigid conduit, again, we're not talking about stainless steel and aluminum fittings and enclosures. We're now talking about just the stainless steel rigid conduit shall only be used with the following. So this is why it's important to make sure you know how to read this thing. Okay, and that's what the code does. You got to realize that long run-on sentence up here is really broken into pieces. And it would be nice if we broke this down to A, B, and a C, but somebody's got to submit that. Code panel's not going to do that on their own. Somebody's got to submit that if we think it makes it easier. I just think that you separate these in different highlighters, then you're going to kind of get the understanding of it. Now, when it comes to just about the stainless steel rigid, it can be used with stainless steel fittings. That's a no-brainer, obviously. It can be used with stainless steel boxes and enclosures. Obviously, that's a no-brainer. It says it can be used with, shall be used with the following: steel, whether it's galvanized, painted, or powder, or PVC coated, and so forth, boxes and enclosures, when again, not subject to severe influences. So it's saying, look, I can use this rigid stainless steel. I can use this with galvanized boxes, steel boxes, which is probably the predominant box you're going to get. I can use this with painted boxes. I can use this with enamel coated boxes that might be steel underneath, right? I can do that with all of those, provided I'm not installing this in a severe corrosive influence location. Anywhere else, not a problem. Stainless steel, a rigid metal conduit, I can put it and cook it to a regular galvanized steel box. Perfectly fine, as long as, again, it's not a severe corrosive influence. So this is not as complicated as people tend to lose it. You just got to take your time and work through it. On an exam, this is low-hanging fruit kind of stuff that plays into the fact that there's a lot of requirements packed into one sentence, and you have to be able to dissect it out. So that's why I talk about highlighting it out. All right, lastly, it's basically stainless steel rigid can be used with stainless steel, obviously a no-brainer. Non-metallic, no-brainer as well. Just remember, if that non-metallic breaks up an effective ground fault current path, be careful in any of that type of scenario. And then, or other approved accessories. Now, there's some informational note here. Notice it says, again, I love these. This is not an informational note. I apologize. This is commentary from NFPA. It's in link, and it should be in your handbook as well. And I like it. I don't always agree with it, but I like it. And with the link, it's in there included. It says, aluminum rigid conduit can be used with steel fittings and enclosures. We saw that earlier, as can aluminum fittings and enclosures with steel. So back and forth, they're fine. Tests show that the galvanic corrosion at steel and aluminum interfaces is minor compared to natural corrosion on the combination of steel and steel or aluminum and aluminum. Okay. So again, they show that testing that it's not significant. That's why they allow you to go back and forth with those applications, right? Just things to be aware of. Now, sizing. We already covered this one. Again, here is where you see the sizing, okay? Half trade size is the smallest. 6 trade size is the largest. You'll notice it doesn't say anything about inches here. It says trade size. We're familiar with calling it half inch. That's okay. But if you want to blow the minds of your people you work with and they keep saying, bring me some 3-inch, you can look at them and keep going, you mean trade size? No, I need some 3-inch. You mean trade size 3? Boy, you really piss them off. You know what I'm saying? All right. Number of conductors. Raceway fill. Somebody asked us, how do we get to use the Chapter 9? How do we get there? Right here. It says the number of conductors shall not exceed that permitted by the percentage fill specified in Table 1, Chapter 9. Again, over 2, it's 40% fill. 2, 31%. 1 is 53%. Those are what's in Table 1, Chapter 9. It also says cables. Now, look at this. For everybody that says you can't run cables in a rigid or other wiring methods, raceway style, what does it say? It says cables shall be permitted to be installed where such use is not prohibited by the respective cable article. So if non-metallic sheath cable in 334 doesn't specifically prohibit it, then nothing says you can't, right? So just be aware that, as I said earlier, raceway fill may come into play if it's a complete run from box to box, cabinet to box. You put a cable in there, you're going to have to do a raceway fill calc. Okay. If it's just a piece of raceway where the cable goes in it to protect it from physical damage, in Chapter 9, Table 1, Note 2 says that you can ignore that. It's just there for physical protection. Don't have to worry about it. Okay. Important that you know all that. Now, it says the number of cables shall not exceed the allowable percentage fill as specified in Table 1, Chapter 9. Okay, but then you have other allowances that you follow over in Chapter 9, Table 1 that you have to be aware of. You have a bunch of different notes, that type of thing. Let's see here. Where are we at? Okay, yeah, so this is just an example, and I'm showing you this because this is an example in Link that will show you how to do the calculation. It gives you another calculation. So this is just showing you how to do those calculations. So be aware. I have no idea what hashtag DUB means. All right, so there you go. So then now bins, how made? Again, this is what we saw earlier. That's going to tell you the number of bins has to be, the bending has to be done so that it does not change the interior diameter. If it changes it, causes it to squish out, probably not the case in rigid, but it's the same in EMT that if you were to bend it, try to field bend it, and it changes the ID in any direction, then you have damaged it. Okay, so that's important. That's why, as an inspector, I look at how you make those bends. If I see something that looks oblong because you bent it with the wrong bender or you did something improperly, then I'm going to reject it. You're going to say, "What's the problem?" I'm going to point to this and tell you why. Okay, so I'm going to be that Karen inspector, right? I'm going to say, "Nope, you decrease the interior diameter of it. That's a violation of the code because you have damaged it, even though it's still serving the purpose. You have damaged it, and I'm going to make you replace it." Okay, I'm not going to make you. I'm just not going to approve your install until you fix it. I'm saying, all right, so that's effectively saying I'm going to make you do it. You know what I mean? Oh, it's like when. There you go. All right, so here it says the eraser, and here's that reference we saw that sent us to Chapter 9, Table 2. It says if you do bend it in the field and you properly do it, then it says the radius of the curve of the field bend to the center line of the conduit shall not be less than indicated in Table 2, Chapter 9. Okay, and of course we know that's the table that we looked at earlier. Okay, here is number of bends, again 360, and you've heard me talk about this. If I have a run between a panel and a box or box to box and I have more than 360 degrees worth of bends, somebody comes in cleverly and says, let's just put a little box in there. We're not going to use the box, we're just putting it in there to meet the bending rules. So we're not exceeding 360 degrees between pull point. Did you know that box that gets put in there still has to be sized as if you were using it as a pull box? So you still have to meet the requirements of 314.28 if you're dealing with 4 gauge and larger conductors in a pull box. You still have to size it. So straight is 8 or angles are 6 times the largest raceway coming in. You still have to do all that. Right? And we have videos on that over on Fast Tracks Tube if you don't understand how to apply, how to do pull box calculations or whatnot, so you can be an expert at it. But again, follow all of those rules. Remember, even if you put the box in there to meet one code rule, you now introduce another code rule that you have to meet. Okay. All right. Next, reaming and threading. It says all cut ends shall be reamed and otherwise finished to remove rough edges. Okay, that's field cut. Obviously, if they come from the manufacturer, they're already cut. And a lot of times they'll come with a little protective thing, the bushing that goes over it. Okay. It says where conduit is threaded in the field, a standard cutting die with a 1 in 16, which is basically a 3/4 of an inch per foot taper, okay, shall be used. That allows it. Okay, so when we see hubs, and this is one big thing that we talk about when you think about the hubs. Hubs are designed, for example, with a hub on the top of a meter. It's designed to meet the taper so that when the raceway screws down into it, it forms a seal. The problem is a lot of connectors with PVC and stuff like that you buy aren't tapered. They're straight. And so they don't fit into the actual fitting properly, and they can allow moisture to get into, okay? So keep that in mind, right? That not all connectors are tapered. But when it comes to threading of the raceways into like hubs on the top of meters or the hubs that you buy, they're going to match the taper because as it screws down into it, it's going to seal it and keep moisture out of it. Get what I'm saying? So again, that's important things to learn. Okay. And it says that PVC coated RMCs shall be threaded in accordance with the manufacturer instructions to prevent damage to the exterior coating. Okay, so if you get something from a manufacturer, I think, what is it, Rob Roy? Is that what I can't remember? Rob Roy? Is that typically what we refer to it as, a PVC jacketed? Get your information from the manufacturer so that in the process you're not damaging it. 9 times out of 10, what they're mainly saying is that you're going to remove the portion where you're threading, but you don't want to have too much of the PVC material removed from the point that the threading stops. Okay, all right, that type of scenario. Also, there's some other standards down here to be aware of, okay, that you can go look at. That's that NECA standard again, which is talking about all different types of conduit. A great one to have if you're doing a lot of work with rigid, intermediate, or EMT. It's just one of those little tools that you can have in your back pocket and refer to it. You know what I'm saying? Securing and supporting, dot 30. Okay, remember, it's very common with all of them. Dot 30 is basically saying RMCs shall be installed as a complete system, means that you need to install it. Again, this also aligns with 300.18. 300.18 says, guess what? Complete installation, okay? Complete. So that, yeah, Rob Roy is probably just a manufacturer, just like Romex is for Southwire. Rob Roy is just that manufacturer that makes PVC coated rigid. Probably now just kind of people are used to these certain names. But anyway, it has to be a complete system. I see a lot of videos online where people are putting in one joint or one stick, 10-foot stick, pulling the conductors through it, then putting a coupling on it, and then pulling it through another piece, and then putting it and twisting it on. That is not the way to do it. I know some of you do it. I know people do it in the pool industry and trenching. They do it all the time. Most commercial electricians don't do that. Most commercial electricians will put the raceways all in, right? And then pull their conductors in. And that's why 300.4G required the bushing or the insulated fitting, because it doesn't want you to damage it during the install. If you ever install it and you see all these little curlings of insulation around your install, then you have removed the insulation value off of that conductor and it reduces it. Okay, so again, got to put those insulated fittings on there, 300.4G, if it's 4 gauge and larger insulated conductors. But when it comes to putting them in the raceways, one of the things we have to remember, it's a complete system. Before you put the conductors in it, complete it, put the fittings on it, everything's done, and then pull your conductors in it. I get it. I'm not here to be that Debbie Downer. I'm not here to be that womp, womp, womp. I'm just saying that's what the code says. Whether you follow it or not, it's irrelevant to me. I'm just giving you the insight. All right, so that's what 300.18 is talking about. Complete run. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it. Let's see. And shall be securely fastened in place and supported in accordance with 344.30 A and B. Okay, so installed, fastened in place, complete run, insulated fittings where you're dealing with 4 insulated conductors and larger, and you're dealing with a raceway. All of it done before you start pulling conductors in it. Okay? Do you all do that? Hopefully you do that. Now, securely fastening. Let's read what it says. RMC shall be secured in accordance with one of the following. Number 1, it says RMC shall be securely fastened within 3 feet. We talked about this the other day. There is people out there that say within 3 feet means it has to be at 2 feet, 11 and whatever. Bullshit. Okay? It says within 3 feet. So anywhere within the span of 3 feet. Okay? Okay? There you go. All right? So, and it says, shall be securely fastened within 3 feet. That means, could I do it at 2 feet? Yes. 1 foot? Yes. Whatever. Okay? Securely fastened at each outlet box, junction box, device box, cabinet, conduit body, and other conduit termination. We don't consider a coupling as the conduit termination. Okay? So you'll see that. Hopefully they'll show the graphic they showed with the EMT when we were talking about that type of thing. All right, next, fastening. Okay, fasteners, straps, whatnot. It says fasteners shall be permitted to be increased to a distance of 5 feet where structural members do not readily permit fastening within 3 feet. So that's an example where we talked about it. Let's say where you're in a parking garage and you have the concrete supports and they're spanning too far, or you have the metal girders that come down and you're securing your raceway, and you go from the box and there isn't one at 3 feet. Well, you're thinking, well, God, what do I do? Do I have to run a stringer from a thread all down and put a hanger on it? Or if I have, let's say, one of the structural braces at 4 feet and 8 inches, can I forget the 3 feet and just secure it at the 4 feet 8 inches? And the answer to that is yes, as long as it's a complete run of EMT. Of rigid metal conduit. Okay, so it allows me to do that. It says fasteners shall be permitted, okay, to increase the distance to 5 feet where structural members do not readily permit fastening within 3 feet. Third one, it says where approved, means where the HJ is okay with it. It says conduit shall not be required to be securely fastened within 3 feet of the service head for above the roof terminations of the mast. So this is where you're using rigid, which again, if you're going a through the eave installation for your service drop that's coming down, then you have rules for that in the installation, how much cable can come over the roof surface, that type of thing, how high up the drip loops have to be, a minimum of 18 inches above the surface area. Again, you have all these rules, right? No more than 6 feet of conductor, no more than, I believe, 4 feet into the building or into the roof line, but it's through the eave. So this is allowance saying, you know what? I get it. You got to go up a little higher. There is no practical way to put a securement there, a fastener there. So with the approval of the AHJ, in conjunction with your local utility, basically making sure you get all your clearances, then again, this is an allowance to say, okay, the AHJ can say that's fine. Doesn't have to be within 3 feet, okay? And also you have a new exception that was added here. You see it's in tan, right? Okay. Trapeze, again, once it goes up, if you're talking about trapeze. Oh, you're talking about support. No, because that's not, the trapeze to me is not part of the structural member of the structure. You're adding the trapeze, right? So you still have to secure and support it at your normal measurements. I don't think of a trapeze for the wiring method as part of any structural member, right? And it mentions the word structural member. So I don't think of a trapeze as any structural member personally. But we haven't gotten to supports yet. We're talking securement, right? So anyway, there. All right, so let's see. If we got an illustration, here you go. So looks what we got here. So this is just like the other one we saw for EMT. So here's within 3 feet. You notice it's right at 3 feet. It's not me, guys out there, those educators that say, oh no, it's got to be less than 3. Dude, wake up. 3 feet or less. We're not making this overcomplicated. They show it here. NFPA even shows it. You're welcome, Elwood. Elwood, I haven't seen you in a while.
Woo, 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 woo.
Thanks
Big
for joining
dog.
us. So right here, 3 feet. And then you see here, it goes up to the next support up to 10 feet, right? Right there. Perfectly fine. You see the measurement here. Okay. There you go. And this is the distance here. So then we got this support, and you see it 10 feet right here. Right. And then you got this support, and this support's within 3 feet here. Okay. Now, if you read the commentary, and we'll associate this with the image, it says, RMC is required to be securely fastened within 3 feet of outlet box, junction box, cabinets, conduit bodies, or other conduit terminations. Couplings are not considered conduit terminations. We can settle a million arguments now from all of those folks out there who argument and saying, well, it says conduit termination. Doesn't that conduit actually terminate? We're talking about the end of its intended path, okay? It's end of intended path into a conduit body. It's end of its intended path into a junction box, end of its continued path into a enclosure. Don't overcomplicate it. A coupling does not end its path, okay? It does not end its intended route, okay? So it says, however, where a structural support members do not permit fastening within 3 feet, secured fastening can be located up to 5 feet away. In addition, RMC is required to be supported at least every 10 foot unless permitted otherwise. Okay. Now I don't have the support. We don't have any other picture. So this is basically My key thing that I want you to take away here is you notice this is a 10-foot stick, and then it has the coupling. So here it's showing you the lay of the length of the run. So this looks like this is a 30-foot run, right? So I have 3 10-foot sticks, and I have a coupling connecting them. And basically you're seeing that this is within 3, then I go up to 10, and I go up to 10, and then this one's got to be within 3. So you notice that I have here this one right here. So your numbers may not always work out where it's perfect. 3 feet, 10, 10, 10, and the last one's 3. But you still have to have it within 3. But you also still have to maintain the fact that you have to have the supports within 10. Okay? And that's what we got in this illustration. Okay? So I'm okay on this end. I'm complied on this end. And then I am okay. I'm 10 feet between supports, and I'm good. Okay? And then obviously between here and the support is fine as well. So that covers all of that. Now, can you put more than that? Absolutely. Can you overkill it? And a lot of people do. Absolutely. Totally up to you. If you want to put more in, this is a minimum. A lot of people say, well, I don't do the minimum. I go above. Well, I would still do the minimum because I can guarantee you my price didn't account for all those extra straps that were unnecessary and the labor to put them in. But you do you. Nothing says that you can't go above it. That doesn't make you a better electrician, right? That just means that you're somebody that wants to go over and above a minimum, and that's perfectly fine. The only caution I'll tell you is, does your customer know that? Because that's whether you're charging more because you go above the minimum, that's between you and your customer, not the NEC. Okay, that type of thing. And could you have a local jurisdiction that modifies something? Yes, but they can't modify it less, okay? Less than what the minimum safety standard is. Can they be more restrictive? Yes. Can they be less restrictive? No. Okay, so if you do get a jurisdiction that is less restrictive, it usually means they're a couple cycles behind the code and they don't know any better. And so it's your job to educate that inspector and do it tactfully. Don't have to be a butthole. Yours may keep you put enough straps on it that even if the building supports would have a problem, that your raceway systems would literally hold the building up. That's okay too. All right, so what about supporting? So that was securing, which is again going to be tandem with supporting, but we have our supporting requirements. So what's the supporting requirements? It says RMC shall be supported in accordance with one of the following. Not all, one of the following. Number 1, conduit shall be supported at intervals not exceeding 10 feet. Okay, so let me tell you real quick. I'll refer to this. If you're meeting these support requirement, these securement requirements, you're also meeting the support requirements. Okay, because if you're required up here to be securely fastened, okay, securely fastened within 3 feet, that's a fastening. So these are the fastening, right? The fasteners. These are the supports, but they are also fastening. But what's interesting is this rule right here was only talking about what? Fastening within 3 feet, okay? Or letting you go to 5 feet. It wasn't talking about the span. So even though this is a fastening, that is within 3 feet, the supporting also can serve as a fastening roll, but that's for the span once you get outside of the 3 feet of each end of where it terminates. Then it's not only supporting it, but it's also securing it as well, that type of thing, right? So we're dealing with the support, and it says conduit shall be supported and not exceeded 10 feet. So if you follow the 3 feet in and then you make sure you have a strap or whatever type fastener, 2-hole, 1-hole, doesn't matter as long as it's for use with the EMT or rigid or whatever you're using. Make sure you secure it that way and you're going to be fine. Now, it also says the distance between supports. Okay, so this is the first one. Okay, conduit, remember it says with one of the following. So the first one says conduit shall be supported at intervals not exceeding 10 feet. Okay, first one. Next one says the distance between supports for straight runs of conduit shall be permitted. So this is a permitted statement. Okay, so this one is shall be supported. This is a mandatory. Mandatory. This one says shall be permitted in accordance with table 344.30b, provided the conduit is made up with threaded couplings and supports that prevent transmission of stresses to terminations where conduit is deflecting between supports, offsets or changes or bends. Okay, so here you see this nifty little table. And let's just go down 3 and larger right here. The maximum support between raceways. This allows 20 feet, okay? Between the maximum distance between rigid metal conduit supports, okay? So remember what it says. This right here shall be supported intervals not exceeding 10 feet. But then you have allowances down here only for the straight applications. And as long as you meet the caveats here, 9 times out of 10, the raceways that are put up by most of the electricians out there are going to not even read this application, and they're not going to be looking at that where there's transitions. They're going to be looking at and say, look, I want to have a securement on there and a support mechanism every 10 feet. That's typically what we see. Now, here it says exposed vertical risers, okay? Not horizontal, vertical, okay? It says from industrial machinery or fixed equipment. So this is where you may drop from a tray or drop from a ceiling system like the I-beams or whatnot, and you're dropping down to a piece of equipment. Well, it says, well, how am I going to secure anything or how am I going to support anything when I drop down to this equipment that's coming from a ceiling? Maybe I have a 20-foot ceiling. I need to get from point A to point B. Okay. Well, it says, all right, look, if it's in a exposed vertical riser application and you're dealing with fixed electrical equipment, or industrial machinery, it says it shall be permitted to be supported at intervals not exceeding 20 feet if the conduit is made up with threaded couplings, and I would assume it is as it's coming down. It says the conduit is supported and securely fastened at the top and the bottom of the riser, and no other means of intermediate support is readily available. So basically it's dropping from the ceiling down to your motor or a piece of equipment, and there's no other way to give us support than as long as it's rigid, as long as it's wrench tight, as long as they're using the couplings that are listed for it, then it's okay as long as it's secured at the top and it's secured at the piece of equipment at the bottom. It's not going anywhere, okay? So that's an acceptable allowance. And then it says horizontal runs, okay? It says horizontal runs of RMC supported by openings through framing members. Okay, so if it's running through framing members that are actually going to do the supporting of it because it's running through these framing members, it says as long as it's running through framing members at intervals that not exceeding 10 feet, which was what? The minimum. So as long as it's not exceeding 10 feet, then, and it's securely fastened within 3 feet of termination. So it's running, let's say, through framing members, for lack of a better example, board holes. It's running through, you're in Chicago, right? You're running this rigid for whatever reason. I don't know why you would use rigid for that, but you're running it through these board holes. You're running it through the framing member. You're okay. It's considered supporting as long as those framing members don't span more than 10 feet. And as long as when you get to the end of that horizontal span, if you're going into a box, you have to make sure that that RMC is secured and supported within 3 feet. If that is done, then it's considered supported as it runs through the framing members. Kind of like non-metallic sheath cable is also considered secure and supported as it's running through framing members, okay? As long as you're not exceeding 4.5 feet. The moment that you come out of that framing member and turn horizontal or vertical and run, I said vertical, excuse me. As long as you come and do vertical and run it parallel to the framing member, that's when the rules change. Then you get back to the securing every 4.5 feet, for example, for non-metallic sheath cable. So you kind of see the dynamics that are involved there. All right, so that's what that is. If I'm giving you an example, here you go. This is an illustration. So it says, lengths of rigid metal conduit is permitted to be supported, but not necessarily secured. Okay, so they're just basically being supported. They're laying on it, okay, by framing members at 10-foot intervals, provided the RMC is secured and supported at least 3 feet from the box enclosure. Installation where the RMC is installed through bar joists are one example. All right, so here's a picture. I don't know if I can zoom in. I don't know how well the zoom doesn't work really well for the zoom, but yeah, it's not working for the zoom. So the picture doesn't change the size. So let me get down to it real quick. I'm sorry. Playing with it as we go doesn't help much. All right, there you go. So right here, if you can see it, that you've got, here's the box. This is secured within 3 feet, right? See that? And then it's going along the span. And this is the, let's see, going 7 feet here. And then from here, It's going 10 feet. Doesn't matter. You see no straps on any of this because the securement has been done. The support portion is allowed. It's considered supported, and it's fine. Okay. So remember, people get it confused. The securement is typically within 3 feet at either end of termination. The support requirement is the span, the way it runs, and you have other allowances. Now, can you have again more in there? Absolutely, you can. You do whatever you want, but just remember that the supporting component in this example, it's laying on top of the structural member. It's fine. It's supported. When you get to the other end, when you terminate to a box, you make sure it has to be done within what? Within 3 feet. Okay. And you're perfectly fine. Now, I and you know that this is not typically how we're going to do it. We're going to either put bat wings or we're going to do something. We're going to basically secure it every 10 feet because that's just what we do traditionally in the industry. Okay. But just want you to be aware that the code allows for that. All right. 344.42 couplings and connectors. So you have rigid, you have threadless. Okay, so threadless couplings and connectors used with conduit shall be made tight. It says, where buried in masonry or concrete, they shall be concrete type. Okay, so threadless could be a compression style or whatever. Typically, rigid's threaded, but again, it is allowing for threadless type. Okay, and it says, where installed in wet locations, they shall comply with 314.15, which is also talking about installing it into enclosures above live parts and sealing it and making sure that it does not cause an issue, that type of thing. So that's what 314.15 says. If it's a wet location and you're entering an enclosure, for example, hey, by the way, go and make sure you follow all these rules. Also, it's a reminder that if you're in a wet location, you can't use things like, you have to make sure that the fittings itself are rated for the environment that you're going to be using them in. By the way, a coupling that threads onto rigid is perfectly fine in a wet location. Okay, but that is not threadless, by the way. Okay, we're talking about threadless, like a compression or something like that. I very rarely have I ever seen personally threadless applications for rigid metal conduit. Not saying they're not out there. I personally, everything that I've ever worked with is threaded. Okay. It says threadless couplings connectors shall not be used on threaded conduit ends unless listed for the purpose. It seems like a no-brainer to me, but here you go. So this is these are by Eaton. So this is designed for rigid and it's a set screw. So there you go. But it is not threaded. It's not threaded entry. So you can use it, but here's what it says. It says, in general, threadless fittings are not intended for use over threads. Well, that's a no-brainer, right? You're not going to take, because you look around and you go, hey, nobody's looking. I got this threadless connector that you're probably going to pay 10 times more for because everything's threaded now, so it's supply and demand. But you got one, and you're like, nobody's looking. I'll take this threaded one and put it in there and then set the set screw. That is wrong. One, because obviously you're taking threaded and putting into one. It may or may not fit, but you're putting it down into it and hitting a set screw onto the threads. It's going to push it and it allows moisture to get in anyway. So that defeats the entire purpose, because we both learned today that the rigid, when you do thread it, it has to be a tapered 3/4 per inch. So at the end of the day, bad install. So, but they do make threadedless ones. Okay. And you cannot install them over the threads. So it has to be an installation where you have rigid with no threads on it, that type of thing. Because the fitting will not seat properly, the threading end of the conduit should be cut off and the conduit reamed thoroughly, obviously reaming, that type of thing. Now, below is a 3-piece threaded coupling, okay, which is used to join 2 lengths of conduit where turning either length is impossible. Okay, so this is like a union, by the way. So in other words, the way it's designed, you got to put it in, but you can basically use the union to tighten it up. Okay, probably paying a fortune for those, just saying. Such as underground or in concrete slabs construction. Another fitting, other fitting for joining conduit is a bolted split coupling. Okay, I don't see a picture of any of that type of stuff here. Point of the matter is, typically rigid is threaded. You can buy threadless. You can't use threaded rigid into a threadless. That's a no-brainer. Duh, right? But yeah, You could have, Jason sees a split. You could have a situation where you need to use a split threaded for an application where something is damaged. And again, these manufacturers are extremely creative and they get their products evaluated. Obviously, any of those type of fittings have got to be listed for use with that wiring method. So again, reaching out to your manufacturer, you'd be surprised at the options they may be able to give you. Running threads. Running threads shall not be used on conduit or connections coupling. So like a thread all. So this is the little nipples that have the full running threads on it. Not to use any of those type of things. Okay, so we're not using any running thread application. Bushings. Bum, bum, bum. Bushings. What does it say? It says where a conduit enters a box, fitting, or other enclosure, it says a bushing shall be provided to protect the wires from abrasion unless the box, fitting, or enclosure is designed to prevent such protection. This is different than 300.4. Okay, 300.4G required it to be installed prior to the install, that type of thing. This requirement is at the end of the day, when the installation is done, there has to be a bushing on it. Notice here, it does not say what size, not size specific, whereas 300.4G is size specific. It's 4 gauge and larger, okay? And that is prior to the install. In this scenario, so many people get confused. This is another bushing requirement. This is not just prior to the install. This is applied on all applications. So this bushing, which doesn't specify that it has to be prior, okay? But it says that it has to have bushings on all entry, unless, of course, there's something that makes it irrelevant due to the connector or whatever it is. So in this scenario right here, what does it say? When a rigid metal conduit of any size, okay, not 4 and larger, any size rigid, it says when a conduit enters a box, fitting, or other enclosure, a bushing shall be, it's not an option, it shall be provided to protect the wires from abrasion unless the box itself, which means it could be coming in on a hub, right? A fitting or enclosed, or like a Myers hub, it's designed with a curved round edge on the inside or whatnot, or enclosure is designed to provide such protection that you do not need to provide the bushing. I can't tell you, because of the vast majority of installations, the different types of fittings, there may be different ones, okay? So you have to make sure you look at the listing for that fitting because it has to be listed, okay? So it'll tell you otherwise, okay? But I'm going to tell you right now, for most of you that are using rigid, when you start getting into 4 gauge and larger, you're going to require a bushing on there anyway because of 300.4G. You get me? Okay? Yeah, like a bell box. A bell box would have, you screw into the bell box with a rigid, for example, and it's all integral into the hub of the bell box. There's no sharp edges on the inside. So it's already designed. So no need for any additional bushings for that. Makes sense. Great. Thanks for adding that, Elwood. Splices and taps. Splices and taps shall be made in accordance to 300.15. Remind you that, again, this just talks about splices. Oops, sorry about that. Okay. You are not going to make any splices within the conduit. Okay. So again, this just talks about different splices and taps, but I'm talking real when it comes to rigid. Despite this sending you to 300.15, despite that, you are not going to ever make any splice or any tap inside of the conduit. Junction boxes, if you're making it in junction boxes, you got to make sure the splice is insulated. It matches the insulation of the conductor, equivalent, all that type of thing. It has nothing to do with splicing or tapping inside of a conduit. Not going to do it, okay? Grounding. This is at 345.60. Remember we saw that previously in the other ones that we looked at for EMT. Here, RMC shall be permitted as an equipment grounding connector. This also jives with 250.118, so no brainer there. And now you got part 3, which is construction. This is inherent by the manufacturer, but we'll just look at it really quick. Okay, rigid. It can be steel with a protective coating like galvanized. That galvanization is the protective coating. So the same way with EMT, people go, well, I need it to be protected for putting it in the earth. Can you put EMT in the earth? If it's galvanized, yes. What's the protective coating? Galvanized zinc. That is the protection. That's the process. It may not qualify for a severe corrosive environment. You need to contact the manufacturer. But people say, I would never put EMT in the earth. Why? Well, because it would rot. Yeah, we'll be long dead. Well, I've seen it rot. Well, there's a high probability that what you used wasn't galvanized. It was just a unprotected ferrous type of EMT or something like that. Now, if you don't like doing it, again, don't you do you. I'm just telling you, go look at Steel Tube Institute. The testing they've done, it's perfectly fine. But I get it. Most people do not like putting EMT directly in the earth, but the code allows it. Same with this. There's many people who would cringe at putting rigid metal rigid conduit in the earth. Well, the code we saw earlier says you can if it's got that protection on it. If it's a severe corrosive environment, then you may have to add a little something, something. Okay, deal with the manufacturer. But how is it made? Well, it's made with steel with a protective coating. It's made in aluminum. It's made in red brass, and it's made in stainless steel. Those are your different construction methods. Okay, the markings 344.20. Each length shall be clearly and durably identified in every 10-foot stick. Whether they put a label on it, they stamp it, which is basically embossed into the actual material. However they do it, the manufacturer will cover that, and it's all followed by their actual UL ANSI standard for construction. For example, with us and wiring cable, we have some allowances where we put it on the sheathing, some allowances where we actually put it on the conductor. Like non-metallic sheet cable, we don't have to put it on the conductor. We put it on the actual sheathing. Things like that. Tray cable, we typically put it on the actual sheathing. Different allowances in the code. Well, it's the same thing for rigid metal conduit. And so as long as they follow their requirements. And again, the things that they have to put on there are all in accordance. And y'all can't see it because this is not letting me scroll down that far to show it. So again, I don't know how I get it down that far so you can see this last one. So I'm going to alter this while I'm in the field, while I'm here with you folks, because I want you to see the last one. Just to show you, because I love you folks. So I want you to see how we do it. Okay. That's how I roll. So there you go on the screen. You see 344.120. That's the last one. Each link shall be durably and legibly marked on the actual stick or joint or whatever you call it. And for non-ferrous conduits of corrosion-resistant material shall be suitably marked. So if I have non-ferrous conduits of corrosion-resistant material, then they have to be marked and have to have the suitable markings that identify it as such so you can make your selection depending on the environment that you're installing it into. Okay? All right. That is that. Let's get to the giveaways. Again, I kept you longer than normal. I apologize for doing that, as I typically do. An hour and 42 minutes. I'm not laughing with you. I'm laughing at you. Okay, if you're a hater, because you spent your time here and you could have been somewhere else. You'll never get that back. Okay, I've stolen an hour in almost 2 hours of your life. You'll never get back if you're a hater. If you enjoyed it, then you learned something. And it was well worth the effort. Okay. All right, you're in for a slate coaster. Alberto V, you're in the drawing for the slate coaster. For those that want to know, they look like this. Okay, they are cool. I use one. The one I'm using for my coffee is an ohm wheel. You'll have your choice. We don't care. All right, let's spin it again. Already be a member, or you already had a free subscription. If you do, we'll spin again, or I can extend it a year from the date. So I extend it out for you if you want. Your choice. Let's see here. Let's do it again. You let me know, David, what you want with that. If you want to spin again, we're more than happy to spin again for you. That again. I didn't like that. I like definitive results. I don't like that wishy-washy result. Jonathan, you are in the drawing for the 2023 Flash. And by the time the drawing, if we have more than the current Flash cards, then you can pick any of the Flash cards you want. All right. I do have subscription should have been extended already, so we won't. So we'll spin you again, David. Let's see. Let me spin you again. And if I haven't gotten you extended, David, don't worry. I've got you. You're marked down, so you're in the list. We'll get you. And it just means you just get a longer one. Did it land on you again? Wow. Okay. All right. I thought I spun it. So you're in the drawing. We do it Monday through Friday, Elijah. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. We could talk about all different types of things. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern time. Every day we do this. All right. And so there you go. All right, folks. I don't know what happened to that. Hit the wrong button. All right. So folks, I appreciate it. Sorry we went longer than normal today. But thank you all for joining. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you didn't, I'm sorry. I apologize if you didn't. But if you did, but at the end of the day, oh, was that your respin, David? I'm sorry. All right, David. I'm sorry about that. All right, David, you're in the drawing for the Ohms wheel. That wasn't you, Battle. I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention. So yes, so David, you're in the Ohms wheel drawing coin. That is, where are they at? Kind of look like these. Kind of look like these coins here. Okay, you're in the drawing for that. Sorry, Jonathan, I thought that was you. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, folks, I appreciate it. Thanks for joining me here on the coffee hour, or hours, plural, today. I skipped my lunch today. Oh, well. Take care. God bless, and we'll catch you on Monday. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday, where we will do another wiring method till we finish these wiring methods out. Put your questions together, and we will talk about them. Till next time, stay safe. God bless. Peace.